Los Angeles Rams played host to not just one, but two of fantasy football's darlings in 2023 in Kyren Williams and Puka Nacua. Now, both of those guys come at very expensive costs in 2024 fantasy football draft. So today, in episode 27 of Inside the 20 by Basement Brewed Fantasy Football, let's talk about whether or not we want to smash or pass on not only Puka Nacua and Kyren Williams at their current fantasy football draft costs, but also Cooper Kupp, Blake Corum, Matthew Stafford, and Demarcus Robinson. Matthew Stafford is entering his age 36 season and year 16 in the NFL. Now, over on drafters.com, Stafford's average draft position, or ADP, is currently QB 19 around pick 155 overall, which is a late 13th round pick. And our first question of the day is, do we want to smash or pass on Matthew Stafford at that cost? Now, when he's on the field with his buddy Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford has already been a solid fantasy football quarterback in the last 3 years that he's been with the LA Rams. He's averaging over 17 fantasy points per game in 35 career games, where both he and Cooper Kupp played at least a very nice 69% of the offensive snaps. Stafford gets you 15 or more fantasy points in nearly 63% of his games with Cooper Kupp, and he gets you 20 or more fantasy points in over 37% of the games that he plays with Cooper Kupp. Already solid when he's playing with Cooper Kupp, and it gets even better, excitingly better, when both Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua are on the field at the same time. In fact, let me let you in on a little bit of the insight of the daily fantasy football insights, the fantasy football nuggets that I am routinely dropping into BBFF's Discord server on a daily basis. In 10 fully healthy, fully staffed games where Matthew Stafford plus Cooper Kupp plus Puka Nacua all played at least a very nice 69% of the offensive snaps, Matthew Stafford averaged 18.7 fantasy points per game in those 10 contests. For context, averaging 18.7 fantasy points per game over a 17-game season would have made Matthew Stafford's fantasy's QB 6 overall in 2023, which, ironically, he finished as fantasy's QB 6 in his first season with the Rams back in 2021, and the ceiling has been great as well, where Matthew Stafford scored 20 or more fantasy points in 5 of those 10 games that he played fully staffed with Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. And again, I just dropped this nugget in the betting portion of BBFF's Discord server, so this is a quick note for the prop bettors out there, but Matthew Stafford averaged over 275 passing yards per game in those 10 games that he played with Cooper Kupp and with Puka Nacua. Now, 275.1 yards per game over a 17-game season would equate to about 4,677 passing yards. That's nearly 1,000 yards more than his current over-under on FanDuel Sportsbook of 3,825.5. In fact, Stafford has gone over 3,825 yards in 10 of his 15 seasons in the NFL. He's a really strong high-end QB2 in best ball leagues. He's a high-end streamer in regular-sized season-long leagues, and he's a guy that absolutely should have his fair share of QB1 weeks or even top 10 weeks in 2024 fantasy football, so long as Puka Nacua and or Cooper Kupp are healthy. He's very, very underdrafted, undervalued in 2024 fantasy football drafts. He's a high-value pick, and he is an absolute smash at his current ADP of QB 19 around pick 155 overall. In Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's 2024 draft guide, Matthew Stafford is currently ranked number 149 overall, and quite frankly, that number is climbing higher and higher every week as we get closer to August. You can get your draft guide using the link that we left for you in the show notes, and you can stay on top of these ranking changes as we go every single week. Now, Let's talk about one of the most interesting running backs in all of 2024 fantasy football. We're talking about Kyren Williams, a guy who absolutely broke out for a monster elite season in 2023. He is entering his age 24 season. He's entering year 3 in the NFL, and he is undoubtedly eyeing up that second contract that's coming up in the next year or two. Currently on drafters.com, Kyren Williams is being drafted as fantasy's RB8 around pick 31 overall, which is a mid-third round pick. And the second question of the day is, do we want to smash or pass on Kyren Williams at that cost? Are you a software wizard? A code ninja? A Forgemaster? Or maybe even just a mad scientist? Then come build your career ladder with Infinity Labs, an award-winning technology company, best place to work, and business of the year with best-in-class benefits and compensation. Visit i-labs.tech. That's i-labs.tech today, where you can learn more about Infinity Labs, our expanding national presence, and why the status quo has no hold on us. Now, on the one hand, on the bright side, Kyren Williams is currently entering 2024 with better odds of leading the NFL in rushing yards than everybody in the NFL except Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, and Breece Hall. That's including guys that are currently drafted ahead of him in fantasy football drafts, guys like Bijan Robinson, who's currently the RB2 overall in fantasy football drafts, Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, and Saquon Barkley. And that's not necessarily surprising considering Kyren Williams went absolutely nuts in 2023. He dominated. We're talking elite numbers when he was on the field. He averaged over 20 PPR points per game and over 21 touches per game when he was on the field. And for context, averaging 20.4 PPR points per game over a 17-game season, that would have made Kyren Williams fantasy's RB2 behind only Christian McCaffrey. He scored 15 or more PPR points in more than 69 very nice % of his games. He scored 20 or more PPR points in more than 53% of his games. And he scored 30 or more PPR points in more than 15% of his games. Kyren Williams was an absolute monster in 2023. But Kyren Williams also had zero backfield competition in 2023. He shared that backfield with guys like Royce Freeman, Ronnie Rivers, Zach Evans, and even a little bit of Cam Akers, who played just 1 game, and Darrell Henderson, who played just 4 games. Kyren Williams handled 182 more touches than the next closest Rams running back, which was Royce Freeman with 78. And that's because 55 of Royce Freeman's 78 touches happened in the 5 games that Kyren Williams didn't play. Williams had zero competition for touches in the 2023 Rams backfield, and that is not going to be the case in 2024. The Rams used their 83rd overall pick, their 3rd round pick, on Michigan's Blake Corum, who was widely considered to be at least among the top tier running backs in this year's draft class. Now, Blake Corum is a bit of an older prospect entering the NFL here in 2024. He's already going to be 24 years old in November, which, by the way, is only 3 months younger than Kyren Williams, who's been in the NFL for 3 years already. Now, what that tells us about fantasy football and what that tells us about the Rams and how they plan to use their running backs is, more often than not, teams don't draft older running backs unless they have plans to use them immediately because of the short shelf life we see on NFL running backs. So a 24-year-old running back prospect is more than likely going to get on the field sooner rather than later. And that's not really all that surprising considering Sean McVay's past experience with using running back committees, which we'll talk about in just a second. And it's not surprising when you consider the Rams GM's Les Snead's recent comments where he said, and I quote, "We always felt like we needed to have as many quality runners as possible so we don't just totally run down Kyren. And we have 1 or 2 or even 3 guys that can contribute and keep everyone fresh. And all of that makes a ton of sense when you consider that Kyren Williams did miss 4 games with an injury as the Rams' workhorse running back last year. It's fair to wonder if Kyren Williams' body is even capable of standing up to a workhorse workload. It makes all the sense in the world that the Rams would go and get a running back in the draft that is ready to contribute right away in week 1. Now, none of this would be especially concerning if the Rams drafted a lower profile running back, but they didn't. They drafted one of the higher profile running backs in the class. They used somewhat expensive draft capital on him. A 3rd-round pick is not cheap in the NFL, especially when using it on a running back. And now we're talking about a running back that has an advanced age, has plenty of experience at the running back position, and we're talking about a Rams philosophy of wanting to use more than one running back. So when you add all of those things together, it equals a potentially smaller workload for Kyren Williams. Remember, Kyren Williams averaged over 21 touches per game last year, but it was largely because the Rams quite simply did not have anybody else to give the ball to out of the backfield. That is not going to be the case in 2024. Okay, so what should we expect from Kyren Williams in 2024 fantasy football? Now, again, I am going to let you in on some fantasy football gold, some fantasy football insights, some of the nuggets that I am dropping every single day inside of BBFF's Discord. This is usually proprietary information that's reserved for my subscribers, but I'm going to let you in with a little sneak peek. If you want to join our Discord server, I left a link for you in the show notes, and I gotta tell you, people tell me all the time that I need to raise the price of this thing, but I keep it cost effective on purpose. It's not a lot of money. It costs less than 1 beer. It costs less than 1 Starbucks per month at $4.99. And again, you can join us using the link that we left for you in the show notes. Now, in 10 seasons as an offensive coordinator or a head coach in the NFL, Sean McVay's RB1 averages just over 243 touches per season. And that's solid. That's between 14 and 16 touches per game for Sean McVay's RB1. However, if you remove 3 monster seasons from Todd Gurley, who, if you'll remember, is a former generational talent, 10th overall pick in the 2015 NFL Draft, a talent that, quite frankly, Kyren Williams is not, a prospect that Kyren Williams was not as a 5th-round pick a few years back. If you remove those 3 seasons of Todd Gurley, then Sean McVay's RB1 averages just over 217 touches per season. In fact, Sean McVay's RB1 has handled 255 or more touches, which is about 15 per game, in just 4 of the 10 seasons that he's been an offensive coordinator or a head coach in the NFL. And 2 of those 4 seasons, of course, belong to Todd Gurley. Now, am I projecting Kyren Williams for just 12 to 14 touches per game in 2024? No. He should get more than 12 to 14 touches per game. But after the Rams used a rather expensive draft pick on Blake Corum, after their general manager's comments, after Sean McVay's resume as an offensive coordinator and a head coach suggests he prefers to use more than one running back, I'm also not projecting Kyren Williams for more than 21 touches per game, which is what he had in 2023. And that's concerning, considering some splits that we dug into inside of Basement Brood Fantasy Football's Discord server. All right, fine. I'll let you in on this gold fantasy football nugget from BBFF's Discord server. I was going to keep it a secret. I was going to keep it in the Discord server, but I'll let you in on this one because this is where the gold really is. Now, in 9 games in 2023 where Kyren Williams handled 20 or more touches, he predictably dominated. I mean, he was elite. He averaged dang near 25 points per game, which is ridiculous. However, there were 4 games that Kyren Williams landed under 20 touches. And in those games, Kyren Williams averaged just 10.4 points per game. He scored fewer than 9 PPR points in 3 of those 4 games. Obviously, be aware of that teeny tiny sample size. 4 games is not a lot. And in those 4 games, Kyren Williams landed anywhere between 12 and 15 touches, and we should project him for at least 15 in 2024. But nonetheless, it's still concerning that if Kyren Williams was not getting 20 or more touches per game, the numbers look quite a bit different, and they tell quite a bit different of a story. So after all of that, the question is, do we smash or pass on Kyren Williams at his current cost of RB8, around pick 31 overall, which is a mid-third round pick? Now, the cost itself for Kyren Williams is fine, around 31 overall. That's a fine cost for him. It's not outrageous. It's not too expensive. But with so much risk and so much foreseeable downside, more often than not, I am passing on Kyren Williams, and I am instead going with somebody like Devontae Smith, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry, of course, and plenty other guys in that third round range. In Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's 2024 draft guide, Kyren Williams is currently ranked 35th overall, which is about 4 spots below his current 31 overall ADP. And again, you can get your draft guide using the link that we left for you in the show notes below. And ADP and rankings are constantly updated, so they're always fresh, no matter when your draft is. Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's 2024 Draft Guide is a resource that BBFF subscribers are using to dominate their drafts and get ahead of their league mates before that first football is even kicked in week 1. It contains 300 players, and it's complete with rankings that are going to help with tough decisions, tiers that help you plan for future draft picks, 2024 analysis and previews for all 300 players, stoplights that suggest the perfect time to draft a player, wait for a player, or reach for a player that you absolutely must have on your roster, and an ADP tracker that shows you which direction a player is trending in real drafts over the last several weeks. The draft guide is built and maintained with 30 plus hours of weekly research and over 300 real drafts done by yours truly. It's like you're walking into your fantasy draft having done 300 of your own to prepare. It's $14.99 per year, and you can find it using the link that we left for you in the show notes. All right, what about that other running back? What about the 83rd overall pick? What about the Rams' third round pick? He's currently being drafted on drafters.com as Fantasy's RB36 around pick 120 overall, which is a late 10th round pick. Do we smash or pass on Blake Corum at that cost? All right, look, just because I'm out on Kyren Williams, that doesn't mean I'm in on Blake Corum, especially at his current cost. Even in those non-Todd Gurley years where Sean McVay's RB2 averaged nearly 123 touches per season, that's still just over 7 touches per game over a 17-game season, which is enough volume to hurt Kyren Williams and bring headaches to Kyren Williams managers, but it's not enough volume for standalone value in fantasy football leagues. Sean McVay's RB2 has handled 170 or more touches, which is about 10 per game, just one time in 10 years as an offensive coordinator or NFL head coach. And on average, Sean McVay's RB2 finishes as fantasy's RB57, and Sean McVay's RB2 has finished as fantasy's RB36 or better in just 3 of the 10 seasons that he's been a coach or offensive coordinator, just one of which has been since 2016. Again, Blake Corum has solid draft capital on his side. He has age on his side. He has experience on his side, and he should see the football field relatively early, sooner than later in his career, and he will be a popular waiver wire pickup if anything were to ever happen to Kyren Williams. But Blake Corum's presence is much more of a nuisance to Kyren Williams than it is standalone value in fantasy football. He is a really easy pass at his current ADP, his current cost of RB36 around pick 120 overall. I'm easily skipping Blake Corum, and I'm instead going with somebody like Brock Purdy, Trey Benson, Jerry Jeudy, Chase Brown, Austin Eckler, Mike Williams, Ezekiel Elliott, Gus Edwards, and a lot more in that range. Blake Corum is an easy no thank you at his current cost. If you want to know specifically where we have Blake Corum ranked, we currently have him at 128 overall in BBFF's Fantasy Football Draft Guide, well below his ADP of 120 overall. Now let's talk about Puka Nacua, last year's fantasy football darling, in addition to Kyren Williams. They had 2 of the great stories in 2023 fantasy football. But as of right now, on drafters.com, Puka Nacua is currently being drafted as fantasy's wide receiver 7 around pick number 10 overall. Do we smash or pass on Puka Nacua at that cost? Well, let's start with the obvious, right? We were quickly made aware of Puka Nacua's insane upside with Matthew Stafford when Cooper Kupp is not on the field, right? He averaged nearly 24 34 points and an absurd 13 targets per game in 4 games with Matthew Stafford, but not with Cooper Kupp. But what about with Cooper Kupp? How did Puka Nacua perform in 2023 fantasy football when his running mate Cooper Kupp was on the field with him? In short, he was still awesome. Here's some more fantasy football analysis that I just dropped in our Discord server just yesterday. In 10 fully healthy games where Matthew Stafford, Puka Nacua, and Cooper Kupp each played at least 63% of the offensive snaps together, Puka Nacua averaged 19 PPR points and 9 targets per game. He scored 20 or more PPR points in 5 of those 10 games, including 2 games over 32 points. Now, he did score fewer than 11 PPR points in 3 of those 10 games, so there's at least some boom or bust to Puka Nacua's profile in 2024 fantasy football, but still, a 30% clip under 11 PPR points isn't that bad of a rate comparatively speaking when looking at other wide receivers. And again, Puka Nacua averaged 19 PPR points per game even with a fully healthy Cooper Kupp on the football field at the same time. And for context, 19 PPR points per game over a 17-game season would have made Puka Nacua fantasy football's wide receiver 4 overall, which is exactly where he ended up anyway, and that's with Cooper Kupp on the field. We already know about his upside when Cooper Kupp is not on the field. Puka Nacua is a smash at his current ADP of wide receiver 7 overall, around pick 10 overall in 2024 fantasy football drafts. And a quick note for the NFL prop bettors out there. And again, this is a nugget that I just dropped in BBFF's betting portion of our Discord server. Puka Nacua averaged 98 receiving yards per game in those 10 fully healthy games that he played with Matthew Stafford and with Cooper Kupp at the same time. And 98 yards per game over a full 17-game season would be about 1,666 receiving yards, which is more than 500 yards more than his current over-under of 1,125, which is on FanDuel's Sportsbook. That looks like an easy smash bet for prop bettors in 2024. All right, let's talk Cooper Kupp, who is entering his age 31 season. He is currently being drafted on Drafters.com as fantasy's wide receiver 17 around pick 22 overall, which is a late second-round pick. Do we smash or pass on Cooper Kupp at that cost? Really quickly, if you're wondering why Drafters.com is my best ball platform of choice, there's really 3 main reasons. Number 1, the ADP is really friendly. The ADP is really soft. There's money to be won. There's prizes and tournaments to be won. Number 2, you can do a fast draft, which is 30 seconds per pick, or you can just rack up a whole bunch of slow drafts all at once because slow drafts allow up to 8 hours per pick. I literally have over 40 drafts going right now as we speak. And number 3, you can join contests for as low as $1.10. Easy platform to play on. You can play on desktop or PC. You can play on the mobile app. And if you're the type of person who enjoys doing a mock draft to get ready for 2024 fantasy football season, I highly recommend instead doing best ball drafts because they're just like mock drafts, but with a little bit of skin in the game, a little bit more fun. If you want to give Drafters a try, I left a link for you down below in the show notes, and if you enter promo code BBFF when you're making your first deposit, Drafters is going to 100% match your first deposit up to $100. It's like you have a free $100 to play fantasy football with. Use promo code BBFF when making that first deposit. Cooper Kupp. Let's start with a friendly reminder that there have been 35 full games where Matthew Stafford and Cooper Kupp have played together. And in those 35 games, Cooper Kupp is still averaging a ridiculous 22.6 PPR points and 10.6 targets per game. He has scored 15 or more PPR points in 29 of the 35 games that he's played with Matthew Stafford. That is dang near 83% of the time that Cooper Kupp is getting you at least 15 PPR points. Oh yeah, and he's also scored 20 or more PPR points in 23 of those 35 games, meaning he's getting you 20 or more PPR points in dang near 66% of the time that he's playing with Matthew Stafford. That's even more insane. And that's not even mentioning that he's scoring 30 or more PPR points in about 22.9% of the games that he plays with Matthew Stafford. This guy is just 2 years removed from being fantasy's number one wide receiver in 2021. He was on pace to be fantasy's wide receiver number one in 2022 before his season was cut short to just 9 games. And yes, the majority of that damage came in 2021 and 2022 when he was basically the only target that Matthew Stafford had. Now Puka Nacua is in town, and we just talked about how awesome Puka Nacua is. So is this the end of the road for Cooper Kupp? Not even close. Here's some more fantasy football magic from BBFF's Discord server. I'm telling you, you gotta join us for less than 1 beer per month using the link that we left for you in the show notes. In the same 10 fully healthy, fully staffed games that the Rams had Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford, and Puka Nacua all on the field for at least 63% of the offensive snap, Cooper Kupp still averaged a really strong 15.5 PPR points per game and 8.6 targets per game. Now, for context, 15.5 PPR points per game over a 17-game season would have made Cooper Kupp fantasy's wide receiver 11 overall just last year. He scored 15 or more PPR points in 5 of those 10 games, including 3 different games over 25 PPR points. And now, to be fair, he did score fewer than 11 PPR points in 4 of those 10 games. So, like Puka Nacua, there is some boom or bust to Cooper Kupp's profile in 2024 fantasy football, but still, he is a wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2 with every week wide receiver 1 overall type of upside, and he is an absolute smash at his current price of wide receiver 17, around pick 22 overall. And in Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's draft guide, we currently have Cooper Kupp ranked 18 overall, which is just ahead of his 22 overall ADP. All right, let's wrap this thing up with Demarcus Robinson, who is entering his age 30 season. He is currently being drafted on drafters.com as fantasy's wide receiver 74, around pick 165 overall, which is a late 14th round pick. Do we smash or pass on Demarcus Robinson at that cost? Oh, hey, look, another fantasy football nugget that we dropped in Basement Brewed Fantasy Football's Discord server yesterday. In 7 full games between weeks 12 and 19, where Demarcus Robinson played at least 40 offensive snaps after unseating Tutu Atwell as the team's wide receiver 3, he averaged 6 targets and nearly 13 points per game, and that's with Puka Nacua, Cooper Kupp, Kyren Williams, and Tyler Higbee all in the lineup. For context, 12.8 PPR points per game over a 17-game season would have made Demarcus Robinson fantasy's wide receiver 25 in 2023. That's wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 type of production from the Rams' number 3 wide receiver towards the tail end of the 2023 season. Robinson scored 13 or more PPR points in 5 of those 7 games, which is over 71% of the time. And Tyler Higbee, who, by the way, averaged 4.4 targets per game in 2023, appears likely to begin the season on the PUP list, making wide receiver 3 sets much more likely to start the season for the Rams in 2023. So assuming Demarcus Robinson is the guy come week 1, he could be in a very appetizing fantasy football spot as soon as week 1 begins. Now, Demarcus Robinson is far from a sure thing. There's plenty of cause for pause when considering Demarcus Robinson in 2024. The guy has never finished better than fantasy's wide receiver 69. Nice, not so nice for fantasy purposes. He's never finished better than wide receiver 69 in his 8-year career. He's never exceeded 48 catches, 466 yards, 4 touchdowns. He's never exceeded any of those numbers in a single season. He's entering his age 30 campaign. And yes, he took over Tutu Atwell's job in week 12 of the 2023 season, but it's at least fair to wonder if he's going to hang on to the wide receiver 3 role all season long. Still, if he is the Rams wide receiver 3 come week 1, Demarcus Robinson is a fantastic late round sleeper type of pick. He's immediately a wide receiver 4/flex in week 1 who can offer wide receiver 3, perhaps even wide receiver 2 types of weeks as long as he's running as Matthew Stafford's wide receiver 3. Of course, beware of Tutu Atwell as the season goes on, but Demarcus Robinson is a great late round bet. He is an absolute smash at his current cost of wide receiver 74, around pick 165 overall, which is a late 14th round pick, well worth a dice roll at that cost. By the way, Demarcus Robinson is currently ranked 162 overall in Basement Brood Fantasy Football's 2024 draft guide, which again, you can pick up yours using the link that we left for you in the show notes. That's all for today. Hope you found today's episode helpful. And in future episodes, we are going to start incorporating questions from you, questions from the audience. So if you have any 2024 fantasy football questions, drop them in the comments below and they just might make it into future episodes of Inside the 20. Of course, please understand that priority must go to Basement Brood Fantasy Football subscribers that are inside our Discord server. I'll see you on the fantasy football field, and I hope to see you in BBFF's Discord server soon. Cheers. This brew's for you.